Welcome back, everybody. This video is going to be about the middle of World War I and how the fighting went and some of the important events there. Again, just to be clear, I'm not covering absolutely 100% of the curriculum here. I'm just trying to highlight the most important things so that we can maintain some progress moving forward in our class. So last time we looked at the opening of fighting in World War I and the declarations of war and how the Germans tried to prevent a two-front war by using the von Schlieffen Plan, cutting through Belgium and Luxembourg, surrounding the French army, and then ultimately how that produced the trench warfare that's going to be so common on the Western Front. Now, beyond that, we've got a couple of other things going on. In 1914, almost as soon as the war starts, on August 4th of 1914, the British took an additional step to try to win the war. And what they did was they blockaded Germany, preventing everything from getting in or out of Germany. This was an attempt to ruin the German economy and hopefully to, in the long term, win the war by ruining their economy. Now, the problem with this is also an illegal action taken by the British government. They were not allowed to block things like food and medicine and other things that would normally be going to civilians. They were allowed to block military kinds of products, but they ultimately had a total blockade of Germany. Now, Germany still did get some supplies in through the Netherlands, but ultimately they were very, very, very limited, and this caused a lot of big problems and a lot of starvation. The British blockade ultimately was an illegal move, and it was something that they were not allowed to do. So in response, Germany decided that they were going to take action to try to break this British blockade. Now, everybody remembers, hopefully, that the British Navy is still the best in the world, and no one's about to take them on, head on, toe to toe. And so the Germans have to find some other way of ultimately attacking the British and damaging the British government and damaging the British economy without being able to directly attack their navy. So what the Germans decided to do was they started submarine warfare. The submarines, or the U-boats as the Germans called them, could get out of port, they could get out into the North Atlantic, they could get after the British, and they could ultimately start sinking Allied shipping going to the United Kingdom. And they definitely started doing this. Now, as the war progressed and got further and further into it, eventually the Germans were so desperate that they started in 1917 what we call unrestricted submarine warfare, which means they wouldn't just attack countries' ships that they were directly at war at. They would also start attacking American ships. They would also start attacking other ships. Any ship that was within, a certain zone around the British Islands was susceptible to being attacked by a German U-boat. And of course, this really became a big problem. In May of 1915, a passenger liner, which was called the HMS Lusitania, was torpedoed by a German U-boat. 1,198 people died, including 128 Americans. Now, the rumor, which no one has ever for sure been able to prove or not, was that the Lusitania was secretly and illegally carrying military equipment on it. Now, we do know pretty sure that there were other passenger liners that we know were carrying military equipment on them, and again, that was not something that was allowed. That was a violation of the rules of war. We don't really know if the Lusitania itself was carrying weapons or was carrying other military product on it, but the Germans thought so, and so the Germans sank it right off the coast of Ireland, killed 128 Americans. Now, this also gives us another important feature of the war, at the beginning of the war at least, which is the United States really desperately tried to maintain its neutrality. The United States did not want to get involved in World War I. We didn't think it was our problem. We didn't think it was our interest to get involved, and so we tried our best to get it to stay out of it. Now, 128 Americans died when the Lusitania was sunk. President Woodrow Wilson of the United States' response to this was, America is too proud to fight. We're not going to get dragged into World War I. It's ultimately not our problem. It's not our situation. And just because you killed 128 Americans by torpedoing a civilian passenger liner doesn't mean we're going to get dragged into the muck. So that really shows you just how strong this kind of isolationism was from the point of view of the United States. Now, beyond that, I also want to go through just a couple of battles just to kind of show you exactly why World War I is considered to be such a kind of pointless and ridiculous war that really should have never happened. So to do this, we're going to look at the map, and then we're going to look at some individual battles on here as well. So obviously the map is divided between the Central Powers and the Triple Entente, as well as the neutral countries, Norway, Sweden, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Spain, that sort of thing. But the red splotches are what we can see as battles. Now, a couple of these we've looked at already. Of course, right outside of the city of Paris, a little bit to the right of the city of Paris, or to the east of the city of Paris, is the Battle of the Marne. Now, that's one of the very first battles in World War I that's really, really super important, because that's where the trenches started. From there, of course, we had the race to the sea, where everybody's digging trenches towards that English Channel and the North Sea up there to the northwest of the Battle of the Marne. And we get a couple of other big battles because of that. So the Battle of the Somme, S-O-M-M-E, that's a big battle as well. Now, the big problem here, remember, is that the von Schlieffen Plan fails. Trench warfare kills the von Schlieffen Plan, and the other problem with the von Schlieffen Plan is the French do not surrender. They do not get knocked out of the war quickly. And on top of that, the Russians get their army together way faster than what the Germans thought they were going to be able to do. And so what we get out of that is Germany gets locked into a two-front war. They're going to be fighting against the French and the British on the Western Front in trenches, and they're going to be fighting against the Russians on the Eastern Front in a moving front. That front line is not going to be stable. It's not going to be stationary. They're not going to be fighting in trenches on the Eastern Front the same way that they are on the Western Front. Now, the first big battle then that we have to worry about on the Eastern Front is called the Battle of Tannenberg. You can see it up there just south of the Baltic Sea between Russia and Germany in what is today part of Poland. The Battle of Tannenberg was a big deal because the Russians invaded Germany very quickly, more quickly than the Germans thought they were going to be able to. And when they did, the Germans had to put together a really humongous effort to try to stop them. And they did, and prevented Russia from invading and conquering Germany. Now, that's a big deal. So the Battle of Tannenberg prevents Russia from establishing an early victory in World War II. But again, the Germans are still in a bad position because they're locked into this two-front war. Some other battles that we get, again, this is mostly just to highlight, how pointless and horrible the First World War was. If you look down there between Belgium, Luxembourg, France, and Germany, we've got another red splotch, which is called Verdun. V-E-R-D-U-N. Now, the Battle of Verdun is a big one, and it really does show us the character of the First World War. So at the Battle of Verdun, it starts in February of 1916. It lasts until December of 1916, which means it's basically 10 months long. Phase 1 of the battle, you can see in the upper right-hand photograph, is a German army advance. They massively went over the top. They massively pushed to advance. They conquered about a mile worth of land and territory, and they took some new land and some new territory, and that ended up pretty well until the French army counterattacked. When the French army counterattacked, they pushed the Germans back almost exactly a mile, and the Battle of Verdun ended up almost exactly where it began in December of 1916. The problem with this is a battle that produced absolutely no gain killed somewhere between 700,000 and 975,000 people altogether. So almost 1 million dead people to end up exactly where the battle began. Again, it's pointless, it's ridiculous, it's silly, it doesn't actually produce anything but lots and lots and lots of dead people. And that's why we kind of talk about the Western Front in World War I as being a meat grinder. People are making huge sacrifices and they're not really getting anything back for it. So that's Verdun. That's a big battle. Next one we have is the Battle of the Somme. And again, if I go back, you can see that Battle of the Somme right just a little bit inland from the English Channel. The Battle of the Somme is a British and French attack. This time it starts in July of 1916. The battle's going to end in November of 1916. The British and the French attacked a German fortress, a German stronghold on the banks of the Somme River. The problem with this is the first time that we had the kind of new recruits in the British Army fighting an actual battle. Just because the war starts in 1914 doesn't mean that most people are going right away into the trenches. It takes time to train them and equip them and to get them over to France and Belgium and to get them into the trenches and to get them acclimated to what they're going to be doing in the war and that sort of thing. So the war starts in 1914, but really in 1916 is when you really start getting a huge amount of new kind of raw soldiers into the front lines. And those raw soldiers are going to be used in the Battle of the Somme here. Now, on the very first day, the British Army lost 57,470 soldiers to casualties. Now, that just means that those are men that can't fight. For a while at least. Out of that 57,470 casualties, 19,240 of them are dead. The old saying went that it took a year and a half to train them and 10 minutes to break them. You can see the amount of artillery shells in the upper left-hand photograph there. You can see the absolute total destruction in the church. You can see the dead bodies laying there in no man's land. The Battle of the Somme was a total and complete loss. It ruined the British Army's ability to continue fighting. It massively wounded the Germans, and it ultimately produced very little gain, almost absolutely no gain. In total, the British lost 420,000 soldiers, the French lost 200,000 soldiers, and the Germans lost about 500,000 soldiers at the battle. Just at the Battle of the Somme, which again from July to November of 1916 shows us another battle, massive loss, no real gain out of it. Right? And so this was really just looking at an overview of what we're getting in terms of fighting and of the battles of World War I. Tannenberg, Verdun, the Somme, the Marne, these are really the big ones that you need to be familiar with in terms of what fighting was like in World War I. And the other big key point here is the difference between the Western Front, which is a stalemate, right, which means no one can establish victory on the Western Front in trenches versus the Eastern Front where things are moving, things are fluid, things are changing all the time. It's almost like two different wars. So when we come back for the next video, what we're going to be dealing with is a German strategy to try to knock Russia out of the war, and we're going to start talking about the Russian Revolution. So again, I hope these videos are useful for you guys. I hope you're getting good information out of them. If you guys have any questions, please do let me know, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions either through Google Classroom or if you just would like to email me, I'd be more than happy to address any of your questions. So stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time.